Brian here with longrangeonly.com. In this video, we're going to talk about the 80mm Revic spotting scope. So, the biggest thing that I think is going to make this something that somebody's going to use personally is going to be the fact that you've got a 27 to 55 power eyepiece for the 80mm, and then you've got a 22 to 45 for the 65mm. So I should say they make this in an 80 and a 65mm. So like I said, 22 to 45 on the 65mm and 27 to 55 on the 80. I don't think that either one of those options are optimal if you're a die-hard spot stuff from 5 miles away and then go after it. There are going to be better options, both in the 65mm for people that want light and the 80, 85, 95s for people that don't care about weight and need the extreme optic quality and zooms to do those types of hunt. This is going to be for somebody that needs to judge trophies in that 1,000 to 1,500 yard range and really not dedicated towards those long sit and glass type of hunts. You just want to find them with binoculars, get out the spotting scope, make sure it's an animal that you want to go after, and go after it. This will be suitable for that. And this eyepiece will be suitable for that. So, like I said, if you're the type of hunter that is more of a spot with binoculars, trophy judge it out to 1,500 yards, say, and that's just a number off the top of my head. I'm not trying to set hard stops because there aren't any. But you want a spotter to judge before you go after it, and that's your type of hunt, more of a spot and stock type of hunt, then this optic will work for you. If you're more of a mountain type hunter where you need to be able to see stuff 3 basins away before you go after it, there definitely is going to be better glass, more suited for that type of hunt. Where this sets itself apart from other options out there is this other eyepiece, and this is a 22 power by 85 or an 18 on the 65. It's fixed, but it has a reticle in it, and so it can double as a spotting scope at the range. So if you're spotting for people shooting, this has a reticle, and I'll put a picture of it up so you can see that reticle, and I'll put a little bit of footage of me shooting with this reticle just so you can see the reticle through some phone footage. It's got a nice dial here so that you can get the reticle adjusted to your eye. And I think that that's what's going to set this apart from other options. It's great for those spot and stock type hunts, and also great at the range. So the person that would want this or should look at this is the person that does the type of hunting I've mentioned a couple times now, but also does a lot of range shooting and wants to be able to spot hits. And you can even use this when you're out hunting, spotting for a buddy at the 1,000 yards in shots. You'll be able to tell them exactly how many minutes they miss if they miss, and you'll still be able to see okay on 22 power. It wouldn't be my ideal situation, but It's very good for someone who does the spot and stock type of hunting, who wants a spotter to go put on the tripod and make sure it's an animal they want to go after, but they also do a lot of range time, and they want to be able to have a spotting scope where they can spot for their buddies. Those are the key features that's going to make this a choice for you. If you don't do any range shooting at all, then I would probably look at other options. Or if you're a 100% glass for days looking for that trophy mule deer or looking for that trophy elk, and you have to be able to have the best spotting scope money can buy, this is not it. Now let's talk about the optics themselves. So with an 80 millimeter in this eyepiece, like I said, it's a 27 to 55. When you're comparing the 55 power to a 60 power, I don't notice any difference at your normal shooting distances or range, spotting distances, out there to a mile, mile and a half, maybe even 2 miles. Once you start getting further, the bigger zooms, like the 70 power Zeiss, is going to start to be obvious that it's just better for those situations. So when it comes to a zoom deal, it comes back to what I just said. The 55 is not going to leave you wanting for those mile and a half, mile or so in. Once you get further, you're on the fringe there, and then as you get even further, you're going to want a bigger zoom, like a 70 millimeter, like the Night Force or the Zeiss off the top of my head. So if that's a zoom ratio that you can handle, or a zoom window you can handle, then we can talk about the features of the glass a little bit more. The controls are very smooth, they're firm, they're very smooth. It's very high quality. It feels like probably an aluminum. It's some of the other ones have plastic, and they actually don't feel quite as nice. It's the same on both of these. The focus adjust is also very smooth, and I found it very easy to focus on game this last hunting season using this eyepiece and the focus ring. It does come with this neoprene cover, and like I said, this one's the 80 millimeter. Glass quality. So this one's a tough one. I did most of my comparison next to a Swaro, and I did some comparison next to the Zeiss. So the Swaro ATM, and then the Zeiss Harpias. The Zeiss Harpia is quite a bit better in my opinion than the Swaro ATM, both in clarity. It's a little bit bigger. It's a 85 versus an 80, and the contrast I think is a little bit better. And then you have the Swaro ATM, which I've used. I don't even know how many years I've been using it. The light transmission is awesome. It's a very bright scope, as is the Zeiss. Both of them are extremely bright. They have good contrast. They have great clarity. When comparing them side by side with this, the clarity is on par between the three, in my opinion. This is used over several different hunts, going back and forth between the glass. The clarity is on par between the three. The field of view is the worst on this. It's a 27 power. And then the Swaro and the Harpia absolutely destroys them, which is my favorite thing about the Harpia. So the field of view, if you're wanting to use this, at 400, 500, 600 yards, it's going to be very tight. That's not why you have a spotting scope, so I wouldn't get focused on that, but it is noteworthy that it's a very tight field of view at those shorter distances, even at 27 power, because it's a 27 power versus most of the others being a 20 or a 22. Clarity is about the same. Field of view is very tight. The brightness of the scope in low light is the darkest on this of those three. And I only want to focus on those three. There's tons. I could throw in the Night Force or the big brand new Swaros, not brand new, but newer Swaros. We're only going to focus on those three. The brightness is not on par with those. It's immediately noticeable about 10 to 15 minutes before last legal shooting light that this is a darker scope and that those other scopes are brighter. What did impress me, and I want to emphasize the word impress, what did impress me is when I'm out there and I'm glassing and I'm comparing, and I can immediately notice that it's a darker scope. Just looking at the trees, looking at leaves, looking at bean stalks, twigs, whatever, little tiny birds flying around out there, 700, 800 yards, 1,200 yards away. It's immediately clear that this is not as bright. Then the deer come out, and this happened on several hunts. In buck season when we're looking for a whitetail buck, and then again in doe season when we're just trying to find a doe to shoot. When the deer come out and you're trying to figure out if this buck is something you want to shoot, the contrast on this Revic was quite a bit better than the Swarovski. I don't want to use the word destroy, but it was noticeably better on this Revic. If I'm trying to look at antlers at 1,200 yards on a whitetail buck, it was easier to see the quality with this. Even though the scope image was darker, the contrast made the antlers pop out. They just made them pop. And it's far easier to figure out if we wanted to shoot a buck with this than the Swaro, which was not something I would not have considered. I would have focused 100% on the image brightness, but the contrast of this set it apart. And if I were only trying to choose between this and the Swaro based on the ability to judge animals in low light, I would take this over the Swarovski, which is something I would not have thought I was going to say when I first got this. I really would have thought its only selling point would be the two eyepieces. But when it comes to judging trophies in that 600 to 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 yards, this is easier to judge them in several different low lighting conditions, different days, clouds overhead, clouds not overhead, the sun's fading, the sun's coming up, right, in that early brightness or early morning low light situation. This was just easier to judge with, which blew me away. So I think we covered the things that people are going to want to know about the most. The clarity is on par. The light transmission or the brightness of the image is a little bit lacking on this. The contrast makes up for it, in my opinion. The zoom range is going to be a consideration for you. I personally really prefer to have more field of view on that low end, just because when I'm trying to get on an animal that I want to judge in that 500 to 1,000 yard range, it's a lot easier to find them with a big field of view and then zoom in. This makes it a little bit more difficult versus others, but most people aren't using a spotting scope for that purpose or considering that when they're using a spotting scope. They just want to know how it performs at the max magnification in low light. So like I said, the clarity's on par, the contrast is a little bit better, the field of view is a little less. The build quality feels to be on par with some of the best out there, and I really like the controls. They're nice and grippy, and they're smooth. They're not too loose, they're not too tight. The focus ring is very easy to get the scope in a peak focus. Other scopes out there. The Swaro is pretty good. The Zeiss is actually kind of difficult, and it's got a 2-speed, but it's very finicky on getting the very precise focus. All of this is kind of hard to put into perspective for somebody who's viewing this, but I think we've talked about all the features. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. You know, the scope as it sits weighs, and it does have an Arca plate on the bottom here, but as it sits, it weighs just under, with the cover on it and everything, just under 4.5 pounds. It's a little on the heavy side, so that's a consideration. The zoom ratio is pretty tight. There's a lot of other scopes out there that have this zoom, 27 to 55 on an 80 millimeter and 22 to 45 on a 65 millimeter. Seems to be a common in that mid-tier spotting scope. The clarity's on par with some of the best. The low light, or the image brightness in low light, is not quite as good as some of the others, but the contrast, in my opinion, makes up for it. And like I said, it makes it easier to spot or judge. And so just from a normal spotting scope standpoint, that's where it sits. I would choose this over probably everything out there other than maybe your high-end Zeiss, high-end Swaros. But it has the added feature of being able to swap out the eyepiece for something that you can use to range with and judge misses with the reticle in this second eyepiece. So if you're a person that, and I think this is going to fit a lot of people. You're not a die-hard mountain hunter, but you do a lot of shooting and you do a lot of the type of hunting that I mentioned. This is going to be the best option out there for that. I'm unaware of another option right now. So it gives you a great hunting spotting scope and an awesome shooting spotting scope. And the price is just under $2,500. So if you're somebody who needs a spotter to fill the dual role, both a hunting scope and a range scope, the Revic spotting scope is one you should look at, whether it be the 80 or the 65 millimeter. Check it out. I'll have a link in the description below to a thread on the forum. You can head on over there, ask me any questions that I didn't answer for you. I'll try to get those answered as quickly as I can. If you're not a member, it's quick, it's free, it's easy to sign up. We'd love to have you. There's a lot of information. In addition to the editor's information, our forum members provide a lot of great information, and it's a great community. We would love to have you. Please like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and turn on notifications so you will be informed of future video releases. We appreciate you taking the time to watch. Have a great day.